We had this gorgeous Mediterranean light just flowing in with tons of distance in the background, attractive people in beautiful Mediterranean light with amazing conditions to work in. I was like, this is easy, this photography.
If you lead an interesting life, good pictures will happen.
Oh, nice. You might well be my sexiest sounding guest.
Go somewhere you've never been before and take a camera.
We had this gorgeous Mediterranean light just flowing in.
Which Asda were you in?
Dartford.
Very nice.
Your first 10,000 pictures of your worst.
Let's sit down, let's have a cup of tea.
Welcome to the show. Folks, thank you very much for joining me and welcome to another episode of the Standout Photography Show with me, Matthew Walker, where as always it is my honour and privilege to interview some of the finest working photographers in the world to unpack their systems, workflows and find out what enables them to perform consistently at the very top of their profession. My guest today is Adam Hills. Adam began his career as an actor, where he trained at the highly respected Arts Ed School in Chiswick, London. For over 7 years, Adam worked as a performer in the industry, before picking up a camera and moving his career from performing to photography. For over a decade, Adam has established himself as one of the leading headshot photographers for performers working in London and throughout the West End. Having established the name Mug Photography as one of the very best, Adam recently made the difficult decision to rebrand his business. In his own words, Adam felt more stylised in both his personality and artistic choices, and felt that the simplicity of a new name and a new website design would allow his work to stand for itself without any distractions. With that, Adam Hills Photography was born. So without further ado, please enjoy my conversation with Adam Hills. Without further ado, Adam Hills, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, how you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. So where in the world are we talking to you today?
I'm in southeast London, in Catford, in my little man cave out the back of the house, which has got a couple of iMacs in it, all my RAID hard drives and all that sort of stuff, and then lots of other paraphernalia like Christmas decorations and all the other sorts of tat.
Excellent. Now, for someone that doesn't, or I should say isn't familiar with your work, and I don't say this lightly, you're possibly the most successful headshot photographer for actors, performers in London, I think it's fair to say. How many headshots do you think you've taken over the years?
Client-wise, I always try and work this out. So I aim to do 2 a day, so say 300 working days a year, call that 600. But then in there's probably a couple of colleges and like kids headshot days where we'll do like maybe 60 or 70 a day. So I reckon it gets close to 1,000 people a year.
Wow. So
maybe sometimes more, sometimes less, depending on, because the group days where you do like, if you do a lot of people on a day, that quickly adds it up. And then, you know, maybe in the summer you might even end up doing like 3 on some days in a busy period. So yeah, it can be a lot. So
this is a test of how good my maths is. So
know,
we're looking at over 10,000, you would say?
That I've shot ever.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably getting to that. Yeah, I've been doing it about 10 years, maybe a bit slower in the first couple, but heavier in the middle couple. So yeah, I'd say about 10,000 people overall. Wow.
Now, you didn't train as a photographer, if I'm not mistaken. You trained as a performer at Arts Ed, is that correct? That's
right, yeah. Musical theatre college, and did that for kind of 7 or 8 years. And then had a couple of years where I crossed over and I was actually in like a Take That tribute band in the evenings and then shooting headshots during the day. So it was kind of good because as I was learning my craft as a photographer, I was kind of having the income kind of topped up with some singing gigs as well. So, and it was quite varied. It was quite a nice time in my life where I was kind of living the best of both worlds. I was doing something I already loved and then I was learning something new that I was becoming to love. So yeah, it was good. And then, yeah, for about the past 10 years, maybe 9 years, I've been a full-time photographer.
So why photography? Having trained as a performer, why was the transition into photography?
There wasn't really a plan behind it. I never, ever said I'm going to be a photographer. I went on a cruise for a year as a singer and bought a Sony A300, I think it was, with a 50mm like 1.4 lens, because I knew I wanted this depth of field thing, and I just wanted to take travel photos with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, was on the ship with me. So it was like we had such good conditions in our contract that it was almost like a paid holiday. So we'd always get off the ship and go around Rhodes or Greek islands or in the Caribbean, and I just enjoyed taking photos. And I've always said it kind of, for me, it fits a lot of my personality in the way it's a bit creative, it's a bit geeky, and you have to be a bit of an entrepreneur at the same time. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like I've got a little bit of all those qualities. I'm not amazing at any of them. I would never call myself an artist, and I would never call myself a real like tech head, but I'm interested in enough in all of it to kind of make those blend of things that I think you need to be a self-employed photographer work. So I think it just kind of fell naturally. I started taking more photos on that job, got home, carried on singing for a bit and was doing stuff for friends. And I just, after a couple of years, I was earning more money from the photography than I was from singing. So it was a very simple decision to kind of push that side of things.
So from a business point of view, was it a natural avenue to go down the headshot route, having come from a performing background and knowing so many performers?
Yeah, I mean, I always think it would be so hard to get into photography, or especially like headshots, if you were a plumber or an accountant, because you just don't have that network of people to start you off. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's true with a lot of businesses. It's not what you know, it's who you know in the early days, who can get you up that ladder quickly, get you in on a contract or a job. And I just knew people that wanted to have their headshots taken, whether I was doing it for free or wanted it very cheaply in the initial stages. And you just have that network, or that like type of person around you in your life to kind of use in a way and get started. So, and I knew I'm not interested in products or landscapes or anything like that. So I knew that it was going to be something about taking photos of people. And when I first started out, I would do a lot more dancers and models and finding a location and going out on a beach and taking photos with lights on location, and a lot more like almost more creative and a bit more like wacky. Do you know what I mean? And a bit more, yeah, creative is the word. And then as I went on, for two reasons. A, business-wise, it's much easier to make money from headshots because it's quite formulaic in the way it is. People want a certain thing. You can reproduce it quickly. It's less complicated. And B, I found that I quite liked the simplicity and honesty and kind of really honing in on a niche. Do you know what I mean? Like, a lot of photographers do a bit of weddings, kids' portraits, families, headshots. And I feel like you never get excellent at one of those things because you don't spend enough time really obsessing about it. Whereas I feel like over the past maybe 8 years, I've really obsessed on headshots in my work, and that's why they improve quickly, I think.
So you mentioned then that you started with kind of a pool of people you know. Where did you, or should I say, how did you start to find clients outside of your network? Because it's still quite a crowded market, the headshot photographer market. And, you know, there's a lot of people that think they can do it, and they can't.
And especially even more so now, I think 10 years ago when I started, it was easier for sure. There was less competition in the market. So I had a couple of friends that I'd shot that were with good agents. They liked their work, the shots that we'd taken, and sent me an email. Oh, we've got someone else. We really loved Amy's shots. Could you do a couple of our other clients? And then it's just a snowball, especially back then when Facebook was so hot as well. Like, all you had to do was put up a photo of a really handsome actor or a really pretty girl on Facebook, and then 3 of their friends would book. It literally snowballed like that in the first few years, and that just isn't the same now. It just doesn't work like that.
Do you remember what your first shoot was like when you did a headshot shoot? Do you remember where you were? Do you remember, was it outdoors?
A paid one, or like first time I tested doing headshots?
Let's do the first time you tested headshots.
So the first time I tested headshots was I was on the ship with me, my now wife, who's an actress, and 2 other actors. There was 4 of us in our kind of like troupe sort of thing. And I remember we were in the Mediterranean somewhere on a Greek island, so the light was just beautiful. We went out on deck 5, so it had a nice overhang. So when you're taking photos, you generally want light on the face coming front on. And so if you imagine like the deck of a ship, we had this gorgeous Mediterranean light just flowing in with tons of distance in the background. So I had this lovely depth of field. I created a reflector out of some tin foil that I nicked off the chefs in the kitchens and a bit of cardboard because I'd seen them do it on YouTube like that. And I was like, this is easy. This is really easy. Like, you know, I had 4, they were all quite attractive, the cast. So I had attractive people in beautiful Mediterranean light with amazing conditions to work in. I was like, this is easy, this photography. Come back to London in November, working with maybe not an easy subject, and that's where you really learn your craft. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. And actually, that's something we're going to come on to a little bit later on. As a self-taught photographer, where did you go in the early days to try and learn techniques such as lighting? You know, you said then you want light on the face. It sounds so obvious now, but back then, how did you go about learning as a self-taught photographer?
Yeah, I don't think I really knew what I was looking for when I was learning. I just knew what I wanted to copy. So back when I first started, there were people like David Hobby, who had the website called Strobist, and that was all about off-camera flash and working with speed lights. And I like that because it seemed more technical than just shooting natural light. And I've always liked the technical, like how can I push this camera to its limits and like trigger lights off the camera, because that seems to opens up so many more possibilities. So yeah, a guy called David Hobby who used to run a blog called Strobist. I don't know if it's there anymore. And then also some of the creative live stuff that was out. There's a guy called Zach Arias, and he had a workshop called One Light or something like that. And it was all about what you can do with one light in the studio on location, and how simple it was. And so it was just kind of buying more and more gear, adding a speed light, adding a softbox, getting another reflector, adding a second speed light with a strip box, and I'd be out in a forest with a dancer just making it up as I go along, kind of putting one softbox up the front and then a strip light at the back because I'd seen someone else doing it, and just learning from mistakes more than anything. And just, I always say to people when they say, how can I get started, just shoot as much as you can and push yourself, like, to try new things. Don't just sit someone in front of the same window and do the same things. Go out and do things, because it might not be where your style ends up, but you learn so much technical knowledge along the way and how to fix situations rather than just staying in your own little comfort box. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, totally. Now, I've spoken to a lot of photographers over the last week or so, some from Getty. I've spoken to Travel Photographer of the Year, and they all have interesting workspaces at home. So some have got log cabins in the back garden, some have got home studios. None of them have their own fully working studio. How did that come about? Because I've been to your studio, and it is a very, very cool space. Where did the decision come from to upgrade your work, so to speak, and get a fully working studio?
I think it comes from me wanting to be quite technical in the way I work. I was shooting from my living room, and that was getting a pain because you're constantly setting stuff up and down because you want your home environment at the same time, and the wife's nagging you because there's always a roll of seamless up, or you can't be bothered to dismantle your 5-foot octa, and just did that. It didn't work for very long. And then I was hiring studios, like for 2 hours here, 3 hours there. So I'd normally say if someone was booking in for a 3 hour shoot, I'd book a studio for 2 hours and then shoot for an hour outdoors in and around it to give them as much as possible. And then I was always just had half an eye looking out on like Gumtree and whatever, Rightmove and stuff like that. But I found this space on Gumtree that looked like a real shed, and my studio is the top floor of a converted barn out the back of a house. You wouldn't even know it was there, and it was horrible when I took it on. It was freezing cold. It had no insulation. It literally had like a roof boards but no like insulation there, and it was freezing, unbearable in the winter. And then every 6 months I'd squeeze the landlord to insulate a bit and put double glazing in. So, but getting back to your point, I suppose the reason I wanted a studio was because I knew I wanted to create work with lights. I didn't want to just be a natural light photographer, because the lighting was what I think is a bit boys in their toys as well. I love buying gadgets and buying this new thing, and it's cool, that does more than my current one does, and now I can create this shape of light with this, and that's completely different, I've got to have it. And you can't really flex those muscles. And I also think if you're only hiring studios, you don't really get into the nitty gritty of learning that sometimes you can set up a lighting setup with someone and shoot them in the afternoon and go, I've nailed it, this looks fantastic, I'm going to just leave it exactly how it is, and then when I come in the morning it's going to be brilliant, I'm never going to move my lights again, I've nailed it, I'm a photographer. And then you put someone else in front of that setup that you did the previous day and you go, this is horrible, it looks terrible, why did this ever work? So you realise that you kind of have to adapt for the client quite a lot. And until I think you feel really at home in your space, and also time, I think you'd waste so much time setting stuff up, setting it down, finding the stuff. Like I can move around my studio so quickly and create new looks just because I know if I just move that, chuck that in the corner, put another light up there, close that curtain, then it's completely different, which you only learn from really living in your space for a long time.
I'm glad you touched on the point of what the studio was like when you first took it on, because that was going to be my question. What was it like? Was it a ready-made studio, or,
No,
as you pointed out, it wasn't? So how's the development of that studio been?
So yeah, the first thing I did was I had a cove built almost immediately, because I wanted to shoot a lot more dance and fashion and portfolio based stuff with models and dancers. So I built this kind of 4 meter wide by 4 meter deep cove, and then I kind of grew out of that because I just got bored of the seamless white look. It's still in the studio, hasn't been painted for a long time, so it's essentially just a base, but it gives me a back wall and a floor still to work on. So yeah, I had the cove built, and then I had the floor redone, then we insulated the roof, then we put double glazing in, and constantly like touching up walls here and there, painting new kind of scenes on different walls. And then I had a ceiling track system, which I love, because I'm now on the Profoto battery operated lights, because cables were always such a nightmare. If you're using like 3 or 4 lights, quickly it becomes like a jungle of wires on the floor, and I was always tripping over, constantly breaking stuff, because you move a cable, it picks up another light stand on the other side of the studio, and smash, there goes another flash head. So I went to all Profoto battery lights, and with this grid system, this track system with pentagraphs that come up and down and lock into place, it's fantastic, because I can just so easily slide a light in or out, or have it behind them without worrying about reaching a cable or a light stand in the background. So had that done, and then literally just before lockdown, annoyingly I've barely used it, I've had this big truck built, which is kind of, I think it's like 6 foot by 4 foot, with 2 sides in like a triangle, like right angle, and then in the middle I've got a horizontal curve, so with like flexible ply. So it's kind of, you imagine a curve which is like a vertical scoop. This is a horizontal scoop, which I'm going to paint white to try and get this almost shadowless like landscape curve to use behind people, and that's all on wheels and can be slid around the studio. And I can hook, I've now got like wooden batten frames with all my canvases stapled and wrapped to, so I can flip those onto them really quickly to hang, because I love working with hand painted canvases, but they're such a bugger to keep the creases out of. As soon as you like fold them once, they don't look like when you first got them. So having them stretched across these like canvas frames, it keeps them nice and taut, so they're all ready to go. So a lot of my studio is all built about speed. The thing I bang on about with my clients is I want to give you as much range as possible, as many options as possible when you come in for 2 or 3 hours. And you can only do that if you can quickly move your stuff around, quickly change the background, and make the scene feel completely different in a couple of moves. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, of course. And actually, you've kind of, again, touched on something I was going to talk to you about, is how you prepare the studio for each headshot client.
I don't at all. It is chaos. I just leave it, because sometimes the best stuff comes out of chaos, and like I can leave something propped up in a corner just messily, and then the window light in the morning is so different to the afternoon. I can be like, oh, that light looks amazing just where it's hitting that, and then build something around it. So I'm so not formulaic, and I think this what comes out of being very literate with light. I don't know if that's the right word, but having a good literacy or vocabulary of your lighting styles, because you can be like, I like that element that I can see there. What do I add to it? Do I need to add something in front or behind, or rim or side, or a special effect light? Do you know what I mean? Like, start with one element, whether it's like, okay, this window is creating beautiful light on my client's face. What do I put behind them? Because I can change that factor, which you can't maybe do if you're outdoors. You know, you might find this beautiful light, but behind it is a horrible scene. Where if you're versatile in the studio and you arm yourself with lots of backgrounds, tools, tricks, lighting, you can kind of create whatever you want on any given day, or just wing it and see what happens. I've got a couple of kind of fail-safe things that I know work, that if I'm like, you know, twiddling my thumbs and thinking, oh, I don't know what to do next, like I go to one of my safe bets. But I like just throwing caution to the wind and seeing what happens.
What do you do if you have a client who is maybe not comfortable in front of camera, so potentially someone who's straight out of college, for example?
Yeah.
How do you work with them to get the best results?
Yeah, I think in my head I always imagine there's 2 ways of approaching it. There's the way I approach it, and I don't think either one is better than the other, but I think it has to be a representation of your personality as a person, because I think you've got to be genuine, and So basically, I don't think it would work for me if people came in and they wanted very softly, like, let's sit down, let's have a cup of tea. Tell me about yourself. Where did you grow up? What do you, what are your, what's your spirit animal? How are your chakras aligned? Like, and I get that works for some people because that's the type of person they are, and some people want to be a little bit stroked and kind of warmed into the session. I'm very much like, right, what have you got? What tops have you got? Great, let's look at that. What's your casting? What do you want to do? Where have you been? Great, let's get cracking, because I can learn more from having that person in front of my camera than chatting to them over a cup of tea. Do you know what I mean? I'm quite mechanical in the way that I work, in that if you start looking at angles and postures and clothing choices and characters and the energy that they're bringing, are they being a bit too kind of frantic and all over the place and they need kind of reining in a little bit because they're not focusing, or are they very, very under energized and they need kind of geeing up a bit or pulling through, or a bit of energy installing into them? I find that out quicker by just sitting them in front of my camera and seeing what happens. And because sometimes you just sit people in front of the camera, you don't need to do a lot. Do you know what I mean? Like, they know how to pose, they know what they want to play, they know how to get that across, and you might as well start taking frames and capturing stuff so that you can capture more and more stuff. Whereas I feel like if I waste an hour of my shoot just kind of smoothing in, then it's time wasted that we could have been taking frames. But I completely get other people work in a different way, and I'm sure it works really well for them. You've
kind of answered this next question in all of the other answers you've given, but your headshots and your images are so instantly recognizable. So for example, my company did some work for Bring It On, the musical, and they did like an open call, and of course everyone brought their 10x8s. And I could see going through, I could see that was one of your shots, that's one of your shots. And I mean that in the most complimentary way, because you look at some headshot photographers and you know it's their work because it's the same shot.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But yours are instantly recognizable, even in completely different settings. Yeah. Why do you think that is? Is that because you love working with light so much?
I don't know. And this is kind of the biggest battle that I have as a photographer in my head nowadays, as it's got more competitive over the past like 5 or so years, and so many more people are getting really good at it as well to compete with. A lot of successful headshot photographers now have this one look thing they do. They've kind of honed in on a style and a look, and they're doing very well from recreating one thing with everyone. And part of me goes, I love the simplicity of that, and I, as a job, I would love how easy it would be to kind of come in and know what you're going to shoot every day and not be like reinventing the wheel. But I just can't do that, because I feel like I just get bored way too quickly, and I like the creation of the process of trying something new, giving everyone something individual that maybe no one else has got. But then I worry, am I not spending the time on focusing on the client and like the real like nitty gritty of direction and kind of micro expression and all that? And have I spent too much time on backgrounds and lighting and blah, blah, blah? So yeah, I am torn. But I think editing nowadays as well, like things about a lot of my shots are quite vibrant and colourful. And like I'll try and pull the colour out of images a lot of the time, and I think a lot of other photographers with their style is quite subdued, flat, almost monochromatic and kind of huey pastel. And some of my work is quite punchy and vibrant and strong. So maybe it's just that kind of like that vibrant colour palette which makes you think it's one of my shots.
I think there's also there's an element of quality as well. You look at your shots and you can tell it's a quality photograph. It's not, as we said, it's not the same setup with just a different face. I think it's that as well, and I think that is a compliment to your skills in lighting somebody as well.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I do like the idea of what I think I can do in a studio with the lighting knowledge I have is create characters much better than if you were just working out in a tunnel or whatever. Do you know what I mean? Or in one window with one background. Like you can't, if you get like a really gritty. I was watching Gangs of London at the moment, and one of my clients popped up on that, a guy called David Avery, who was playing one of the undercover cops, and I had to go on his spotlight to remember what we'd shot, and it was really nice to see that he had on his spotlight one that was like this really shadowy, moody, kind of gritty, he's Middle Eastern looking, which had that kind of like terrorist bracket kind of look, and then something that was really warm and bright, and I thought I bet it was the kind of shadowy one that got him that, which he wouldn't have if he was just shooting in a way more naturalistic kind of way.
As a photographer, what does it look like? You talked about colours then. What does the journey look like from the moment you take the card out of the camera to delivering those final images? What does that look like in terms of a process?
So in my studio, I tend to review images after every kind of look, so every lighting setup. So, I'll generally start with window light because it's a good safe bet. Natural light satisfies and kind of makes most people look pleasing to the eye without too much fuss. It's quite easy to get going. So normally, if the light is good, start off with a window light setup, do a couple of tops, stick them on the computer. Hopefully there's something good in there to inspire the client so they see and think, oh, this is going in the right direction. I just might need to tweak this or tweak that. And I'm very vocal and honest as well. Be like, I don't think you'll give it enough here, or this is really great. This is the path we want to go down, or this top isn't working. I don't think your hair looks great like that, blah, blah, blah. So I don't just say, oh, amazing, wow, you look great, yeah, it's brilliant, let's take some more. I'm very, very opinionated in how I think it could be improved. And then we'll work through that process 3 or 4 times. So we'll do 3 or 4 different kind of looks in a whole load of tops, try different hair, and then I'll probably have 600-700 images. I'll go through them, narrow those down to maybe 400, just getting rid of the absolute worst or the dull ones or duplicates. So I'll have 400. I'll tweak them a little bit in Lightroom at that stage, so a little bit contrast, white balance correction, tiny bit of sharpening, a little bit of looking at the saturation, stuff like that. Just nothing too crazy, so almost out of camera, but just also that's a bit of a sales technique as well. I want people to love their images because then they'll buy more. And if they're a bit flat and near out of camera, I think people don't get as inspired. So if you give them that one step closer to the finished image, there's more chance that people are going to look through and be like, oh, I love that one. I also love that one. Look at the colours in that one. So I think you sell more images from the shoot. And then I've got a system called Photo Workflow, which is another part of my business, which I've developed, which is a gallery system for photographers. And I kind of lease it to other photographers to manage their business. And so I build a gallery in there. They go in, pick their favourites, link it to their agent. Their agent can have their opinion on it. They put an order in. I get the order. Then one thing that I think grew my business quickly was deciding to work with a retoucher, because I think I make money from shooting images, not from sitting in my office retouching, because there's just not as big a profit margin in it. So I decided I've got 2 retouchers that I work with, both that I've been working with for years and years. They know exactly what I want. At the time of ordering, the client can put in notes for what they want from the image, so they've got everything they need. They get the images, they retouch them, send them to me. I have a quick look through, make sure there's nothing glaringly obvious that I want tweaked, and then send them off to the client. And that's all done with just a few clicks, because that piece of software that I've had built is all about automation and running the business as smoothly as possible, with me doing as little legwork as I can.
One of the things I love about your work is exactly what you said earlier. You're a photographer, but you're also a businessman, and that's very, very important, because ultimately you can capture the best image in the world. You can't sell it. It's all for nothing apart from your own satisfaction. You very casually said you'd developed Photo Workflow, which is an incredible feat, really. You've designed and commissioned a whole online system for photographers.
Yeah.
What was the idea of doing that? Had you struggled to find something that was already out there that wasn't quite working for you?
Yeah, I think it was about a lot of it was about common sense. I could not believe, there's a few little tasks that I have in my job, or headshot photographers have in their business, that are quite niche. Working with agents, not many other photographers need to have agents looking at a client's images, and no other systems out there really did that in an eloquent way. Working with a retoucher, I couldn't believe that there wasn't a system out there that you could easily link up to a retoucher. They could have access to certain files. It didn't exist anywhere. I thought that seemed crazy. And I had a booking system, but it wasn't linked to my gallery system. So I had a booking system that would take all the client's details in, book them a time, and then when it came to creating a gallery, I had to duplicate that client again. So I'm running 2 databases as well. None of it made sense. I had an accounting package as well, that none of that made sense because it wasn't linked to one central database. So, and also that wasted time. Every evening it was like mundane tasks that were wasting my time, especially as I had kids on the way. Like your hours get cut into more and more and more. So I started off very simple, just wanted a gallery ordering system. So I had that built. And then it just grew and grew. Asked other photographers that I knew would fit the system well, did they want to try it? And that grew and grew. And then we added on more and more stuff, added on the booking system, added on, it now talks to my QuickBooks API. So when someone books in, I have all their details brought in, like what type of session they've booked, how much deposit they've paid, the date, the time, blah, blah, blah. And that now talks via my software, Photo Workflow, to the QuickBooks API, which is my accounting package. I press one button, it creates an invoice, it sends it off to the client. So there's no going over to write invoices in QuickBooks, which was something I was terrible at, was keeping on top of my invoices. And once a month I'd panic and spend 4 hours in the office manually creating invoices, which just makes no sense. So it was all about streamlining. I can upload a gallery and send it to my client in about 3 clicks. From the light, it's got a Lightroom plugin. There's so much of it that it would be a whole separate conversation. But I've got a Lightroom plugin, so when I've got my gallery ready in my Lightroom, as in the images I want to upload, file, export. I find the client that I'm uploading to in my plugin, export at the settings I create in Lightroom, and they're up there. Done.
Wow.
Wow. I know that's kind of like, that's all a bit mumbo jumbo to a lot of people, I'm sure, but it was all just a process of saving time and obviously another strand to business. And now it's not a massive part of my business. It's now making profit every month, not the development costs that I've spent on it yet, but it's kind of it's almost like looking at it as like a potential little pension plan. Do you know what I mean? If I could get the membership on it really good as I get older, and because I think photography is quite a physical task. Do you know what I mean? It can really take it out on you. I definitely feel it in my shoulders and my bodies, having done it quite full time for 10 years. And I can't imagine myself being 60 thinking I've got 5 more years of this. And I think also with actors, it has to be quite current. Do you know what I mean? And as I get turned into a miserable old bloke, I might not be the right person to be shooting 21-year-old girls coming straight out of dance college, because there's just a gap in generation there. I can just about get away with it now, maybe. So I've got to think of the long term. I've got 2 kids that are going to need supporting for many, many years. So I need to think of where could I potentially move my business. And especially as it gets more and more competitive in the headshot market, I've definitely noticed that from 5 years ago, when I was just turning people away, couldn't fit people in, could shoot as many as I wanted, it's not like that anymore. So just having to try and be a little bit savvy about, where to add elements to your business.
How many, we'll come back to Photo Workflow just for a second before we move on. How many months in advance are you normally booked up?
It's not months now, I would say about a month sort of thing. And there's always holes in the diary. Like, people now are booking for July and August because they're organised. But then, well, God knows at the moment what's going on. But, in a normal condition, it would maybe be like 2 weeks. You could get a slot sort of thing in the diary. But as I've got older, I've started to trim down the amount I want to shoot a week, whereas I would happily shoot 3 a day before. Now I'll only do 2 because it just does get tiring.
Of course. And just to revisit Photo Workflow before we move on, you said you had that developed, so you had the idea for it. Did you actually develop it? Did you do the coding, or did you outsource that?
No, I had to find people that could do it because I know nothing about it. I've got a basic idea of what you can and can't do, or what could be done. And I've learned a lot more along the way, kind of, about storage and servers. And it's funny, actually, because my coders know how to code it. They know how to, build the thing. And I can say, I need it to do this, this, and this. I want it to look a bit like that. Here's a kind of mock-up. Go away, build it. They come back, and the language barrier often means I go, that's nothing like what I wanted. Let's start again. We've wasted loads of hours, but let's keep patient and try this way. But what the coders don't get, which I understand, is that what's the most efficient way to do things? Do you know what I mean? Or how can we save money on a simple thing like in Amazon where we store all the images? There's 2 different ways you can store things in S3, which is a standard way, or Glacier. So last year what we did was we created an app which would move images between the 2 things as and when they were needed, just to cut down on kind of storage costs. So I went and researched all that, which the coders knew nothing about, and I was having to teach them a concept that they didn't know, but I had no idea on how to actually make it happen. Do you know what I mean? Of
course. So aside from actually taking photographs, you've now started doing training workshops, which again is a testament to your work, because photographers admire your work, essentially. What prompted the decision to start teaching?
I'd had quite a few people just dropping messages via social media saying, "Oh, I love your work. Do you ever do one-to-one classes or training?" So I did a couple of one-to-one days in the studio, and I didn't really write a course as such. I just said, "Look, come to my studio. We've got every tool you're going to want to use, like modifiers, if there's a specific type of modifier, or just get into grips with studio lighting, we can do anything like that you want. I'll get a couple of people in to be faces for the day, normally a guy in the morning, a girl in the afternoon, and let's just play. Let's just experiment. We've got so many backgrounds. We've got outdoor space if we want to use it. We can blend natural light with studio light if that's something which is quite an advanced kind of task. We just play in the studio. I think people really thrived on that, because it wasn't because sometimes when you go to a lot of workshops or watch stuff, the first hour or two, sometimes you're I know all this bit, I know how to set my exposure. So being able to just turn it into a bit of a playground and be right, what do you want to try? And I'll show you how I do it, and then I'll give you a task to do. So I'll maybe if people struggle with studio, I'll set the shot up. I'll be right, this is my f-stop, this is the power of that light, turn around, then I'll muck up all the camera settings and all the lighting settings. I'm try and get it back to where we were using the rules that you now know. Do you know what I mean? If it's too bright, what do you do? Well, you can either increase your f-stop or turn down the power on the light. So I would turn it into just a bit more kind of collaborative play. And then so I'm part of the APHP, one of the founding members of that, which is kind of like a casting directors guild for headshot photographers. You have to be quite experienced and have a good body of work to be a member there. And they wanted to do a studio lighting workshop and asked me to do a group one. And I was a bit nervous that no one would want to come, and that kind of hesitation that anyone has when they start something new. And it was great. We hired a massive studio in Waterloo and did a workshop for about 24 people, I think it was, and it was a massive success. So I haven't done another group workshop yet, and I've had loads of requests for people to ask me to do another one, but it just hasn't worked out with young family and around work and all stuff. But I'd love to do another good size group workshop on studio lighting. Yeah, but since then, since the one I did for the APHP, I've had another 5 or 6 people that have come to the studio to do kind of one-on-ones.
What is so we've talked about business quite a bit, and for the last decade you've advertised and your branding has been mug photography. That's MUG for anybody that hasn't checked your work out. And recently you've transitioned to Adam Hill's photography. That's, from a business point of view, that's a big decision, because mug is extremely well known, particularly within the industry, the performing industry. What prompted the decision to shift away from mug and become Adam Hill's photography?
Yeah, I loved the quirkiness and niche of it for a long time. When I first started out, I was I don't want to be Adam Hill's photography, because the amount of time I would ask friends, "Oh, I like headshots. Who did them?" "Oh, it was John. Oh, I can't remember his surname." And then you can't recommend someone if you can't remember their name to even Google it. Then it's useless. So I was I need to be bold, niche, something you won't forget. Mug shot, the slang of having your photo of your mug. Do you know what I mean? So I kind of went with that, and it worked really well. And I was shooting a lot more musical theatre and kind of more glamorous and dynamic and jazzy and quirky shots when I first started out. And as I matured as a person, I just felt like it started to grate a bit. It didn't really feel like me. I feel more grown up than this quirky, vibrant mug brand. And it took me about 2 or 3 years to decide whether to do it or not. And I kind of, one point I'd be no, mug's strong, people know it, stick with it. And then other times I'd be no, it's time for a change. I need to, and my work had changed to be a little bit more honest and kind of subdued and relaxed and kind of a bit more neutral. And I just felt this kind of monochromatic but strong new branding kind of put the branding in the background, so the images felt stronger, if that makes sense. So that it was more about the images than this jazzy business. And I've never done the kind of, it's funny, one thing that bugs me is when you read people's websites and that they're probably just a photographer who works out of their bag and the boot of their car, and it's all welcome to jazzy headshots, we are the leading da-da-da, and it's all all this pomp, and it's just dude, you're just a bloke taking photos, and there's nothing wrong with that. Don't try and oversell what you do. Just be honest, and kind of all people care about is the quality of the image and the price point. And if you get that right and your quality is consistent, I think you'll do well. You don't need all this kind of over the top salesman techniques. I feel like people can see through it.
Yeah, in fact, I saw somewhere a quote that you'd put, and correct me if I'm wrong. It was, "Price is what you pay, and value is what you get." Is that you?
I didn't make it up, but that's the one that I use. That's one that I kind of come back to quite a lot. Yeah, it was on my old website. I can't remember who said it, but I thought that is bang on. Like, price is the point that you pay, and value is, was it worth the money that you've paid? So yeah, I think that's something to really address in your business and your competition all the time.
Yeah, what prompted me to think that was that you clearly, this is what you do and you know it inside out. And there are a lot of people who think they can take headshots and charge, extortionate prices for it. But actually, there's an enormous amount of work involved to capture the honesty of somebody. Exactly what you've just said. What is the loft?
So the loft is, so I feel like splitting your work up a little bit is important, because it's funny, one of the reasons I changed the brand as well, because I want to shoot more actors who are maybe a little bit more, trying to find the right word, not highbrow, but kind of like not your musical theatre crowd, which is nothing wrong with. It's just I've done a lot of that, and I wanted to develop my work into more like TV, film, and possibly one day celebrity portraiture sort of stuff. And I felt like Mug was a bit too quirky for that. So Adam Hill's photography just felt a bit more like, think of like Annie Leibovitz, or do you know what I mean? Like, it has that kind of like calm but secure quality to it. I was rambling then. What was the question? And then
I was saying what is the loft?
Oh, the loft. But I do enjoy shooting a bit of fashion and a bit of dance and kind of portfolio, kind of body shot stuff for models and dancers who need that side for their work. So I wanted to separate it. And the loft is a more creative, a bit more funky. It's often girls in underwear and swimwear, which isn't horrible to shoot, but it kind of does clash with headshots. So I wanted to just put it in a separate kind of box. So yeah, I do enjoy shooting that. It's just not something I focus on at the moment. But I think it's hard because that looks so good in natural light, that sort of stuff, and we're so unlucky with being weather dependent in this country that it's hard to kind of guarantee the quality of that year round.
Of course. Have you noticed, we live in a world of social media, particularly amongst under 25s at the moment. Have you noticed a shift towards, or not towards, have you noticed more influencers wanting images as well as performers? Not as much as I thought. I get the odd random corporate thing where someone's like, oh yeah, I'm working for Facebook, and I would just want a really good photo I'm thinking of moving to a new job and I just want really good pictures for that. But maybe like 3 or 4 a year. I thought there'd be a lot more. I think the reason is because influencers don't want to pay. Ah, okay.
I think influencers want test shoots and they want you to collaborate, and I'm like, that's not going to pay the mortgage. Do you know what I mean? But I don't even get the inquiries. But maybe my website is just worded in a way that like it feels like it's not worth asking. Do you know what I mean? But I think a lot of the people that would shoot influencers would be people that want to be influencer photographers rather than working photographers anyway. Do you know what I mean? And like, it's hard when you start adding overheads of a studio and a family and VAT to your business, then you can't do stuff for fun. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, of course. In fact, I spoke to Philip Lee Harvey, who I mentioned earlier was Travel Photographer of the Year, and he's travelled to 120 countries and whatnot. And he said every now and then I'll get someone using an image that I've taken, and they've said something along the lines of, "Thank you, Philip, for this wonderful image. Why not check us out?" And he's like, No, I've not given you that image. You pay me, or you don't use it. Yeah. Simple as that. Anyway, we could go down a whole cheeky rabbit hole with that. Hole of that, yeah. Yeah, let's not. Let's move on to, is there somebody, out of all of the people that you have photographed, is there someone that you would describe as being maybe the most interesting that you photographed? Has someone walked in and you thought, wow? I'm so bad with names, but yeah, I mean, sometimes it's the quirkiest looking people that have... Actually, there was one guy I remember, and it was a guy called Matthew Creed. He was a third-year student. I can't remember where, maybe... Might have even come down from Scotland, from a place from not the RSC in Scotland, but RCS, Royal Conservatoire Scotland. Oh, yes. And he just had this really, really like almost ghoulish look. It wasn't unattractive, but he had this long, and he had such a character. And like, when the right part comes up for you, it almost like a bit like a Dementor in Harry Potter. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's people with like that really unique, quirky face that it just has that photographic quality to it, that where light skims it, the shadows fall where you want them to fall, you can add drama to it. Those sort of faces are great. And obviously, like I've had a couple of like female models who work as actresses as well, and they're fab to shoot because you don't have to direct them. All their proportions are amazing within their face and kind of their shoulders and their bone structure, and they just look down the camera in a certain way, which kind of is just, it kind of what's the word, it seduces the camera so easily, and they're fantastic to shoot as well. But I think what's interesting to shoot, or what I love shooting, is just people that have character written all over them. You can see what they are, and they're not too, and I say this because I am one of these people, not too meh. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm just a close to middle-aged white male. There's nothing really more to be said about that. Do you know what I mean? And they're the hardest people to kind of draw really unique images out of them, because it might not be there in the first place.
What is the most important item in your, I was going to say kit bag, but actually for you it's probably your studio?
Most important item, as in what can I live without, above and beyond the body sort of thing?
It could be, I mean, it could be you, because ultimately without you, there's no picture. But yeah, it's this. Oh, go on. Sorry, say that again. Lights.
Yeah, lights. So this is a Profoto B10. This is one of my favourite light. It's lightweight. It's got a great modelling bulb, so you can use the modelling bulb on its own, which has bicolour on it. I don't know if I'm doing any video here, but it's got a light and a tungsten quality bulb to it. You can stick any modifier on it. It's battery. That is the most useful bit. And no, I tell you what, I tell a lie. This is the second most useful bit. The most important bit in my studio is the 2 meter square window I have, because that is often the base of all the shots I take, unless it's a studio owned shot. Normally it will either be part of the background, illuminating a hand painted background. It will be the front light. So that, and I wish it was bigger, and I wish it was north facing, but it's still the most important bit that I've got. It's south facing, which is a complete pain in the bum, because on a sunny but cloudy day, it's in, out, blue, warm, completely wrecks your kind of technical side of things. But when it's right, it's perfect.
Do you have an option where the studio is based to shoot outdoor if need be?
Yeah, I've got a good little doorway which enters into the studio, and then a few like tunnels and little spots in and around. So if someone books a 3-hour session, I'll generally do kind of 2 hours in the studio, and then if the weather's nice and it's not windy or rainy, we'll use outside as well.
Outside of your work as a photographer, do you do any other type of photography work? So obviously you work very much in the performance arena. Do you ever do production photography, rehearsal photography? If yes, what do you do? If not, why not? I
used to do a bit of production. I've probably shot 20 weddings, and then a little bit of the like fashiony kind of portfolio stuff. But no, not right now. I don't photograph my own kids. Occasionally get them into the studio biannually to kind of try and get to in a summer like portrait of them, and that's it really. Outside
of work, do you have any photography passions? Travel, for example, or anything like that?
No, I wish I was more creative with it. I always get ideas for personal projects. Like I was just thinking during this lockdown, I'd love to do a project called Families at Their Front Doors, because my kid's in reception now. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to get all of the families in her little reception year, there's maybe like 60 or 70 families, and take a family portrait outside their front door during lockdown and turn it into a really nice coffee table book, and maybe sell it back to the families and turn the profits into like a charitable donation to somewhere. It's just the thought of execution. Like, how the hell? I don't want to be that moany like parent, but 2 kids in lockdown, just zero time to do anything. We've turned into chefs and teachers. We cook 3 meals a day and try and homeschool. It's like an hour for telly at the end of the day. I've never been so busy. It's ridiculous. But yeah, it's just the time constraints. Otherwise, I'm really envious of kind of like the male photographers in their mid-20s who are single and just can like do whatever they want, as well as paid work, can do all this creative stuff and go traveling with their profits. And yeah, like I would love to be doing more of that, but I love my family, so I'm going to have to commit to them right now.
Hey, listen, nothing wrong with that whatsoever. Yeah. And 2 kids during lockdown, I can't even begin to imagine how hard that is. We've got a dog, and he's...
Oh, we've got a dog as well.
Organising his walks, particularly in the first few weeks where you're only allowed out an hour, was tough enough.
Yeah, it's been a really weird period because it's been hard because I wanted to be more productive with this time that we've got, but it's been lovely spending the time. My little boy is only like 18 months, so seeing him like just change daily has been amazing, which I would have missed a lot of if I'd have had a busy schedule at the studio.
Of course. If someone had £50 to spend to improve their photography, how would you advise they spend it?
Try and get a model to come to them, work with them for £50, someone who knows how to take to either buy a tutorial or work with not a model, but like an experienced photogenic person, someone that you're not going to have to direct everything, someone, because you can't improve your lighting or your technical ability until you know that the person should be taking a good photo, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? Because sometimes I've battled to try and get a good photo out of someone, or when I say good, I mean like very visually appealing, and it might just not be there with that person, which sounds harsh because, you know, you'll hear people say you can get a good photo out of everyone. Yeah, you can get a good photo of that person, but there's difference to something that looks visually amazing. You're not going to get that with everyone. So finding someone to work with who you know takes a great shot and is easy to work with and is collaborative would probably be a good investment on that. So you know that at the end of that day you're going to walk away with useful shots.
I see. Yeah. And because you're right, because then you can focus purely and solely on you and your work as a photographer.
Yeah, because otherwise if you're having to just like be like, oh, sit up straight, or can you smile? Oh, I don't like smiling. Then you're dealing with people's insecurities or, you know, stuff rather than focusing on. That's why when you see photography tutorials or workshops, they've always got experienced people in front of the camera because they don't want to have to manage the subject. It's about managing the technique.
Has there been a situation where you've really, not struggled, but had to really work with someone to get a good result? I'll give you an example. I've taken headshots in the past, nowhere near to the extent that you have, but, you know, I kind of roughly know my way around. And I photographed somebody that was a drag artist, but I photographed him, and he was so closed as himself because he was so used to being his alter ego. It was really, really difficult to get him to relax and be himself. Have you ever had a situation similar to that, and how did you deal with it?
Yeah, just almost weekly, I'd say. That I think that's part of one of the biggest parts of being skilled at the job is relaxing people, opening them up, knowing the technical stuff of posing, posture, angles, lighting. Do you know what I mean? Like that's the way, and you can only do so much, and you know you need to know how to create rapport with someone as well. Do they want energy and being pushed? Do they want to be challenged, or do they need to be like cajoled into doing it? Do you know what I mean? And everyone's different, but it happens all the time. Yeah, and I think that's like another toolkit that you've got. Sometimes you have to go, I'm going to stop thinking about the technical aspects of this shoot, and I'm going to have to focus on this person because they're not with me, they're not on side yet.
What's the ultimate goal for you as a photographer and also as a business owner?
Ultimate goal, I said this on an Instagram story the other day and it made a lot of people laugh. I said, my goal as a photographer is only to take photos of people that want to have their photo taken. Do you know what I mean? Like, because most of the time, like, you go, oh, I hate having my photo taken, I'm so unphotogenic. And that is like, when it's the first thing someone says at a shoot, like it's such a downer. Like, so one of my goals is to only take photos of people that want their photo taking, because that would make life so much more easier and more positive in the studio. And the other caveat to that is to maybe only have to do it twice a week, because photo workflow is earning the money to pay my mortgage and the kids' private school fees. Pipe dream.
Excellent answer. Excellent answer. All right, I'm going to give you a 50-50 choice here.
Okay.
Black and white or colour?
Colour.
Why?
Colour graded.
Okay.
Like
okay.
Really nicely colour graded, greens, blues, orange, teal, saturated with some crushed blacks colour.
Flash or natural light?
Both at the same time.
Oh, good answer. Outdoor or studio?
Studio with natural light, because then I can get the benefits of outdoor but in the studio without pedestrians, wind, rain, traffic, noise.
Canon, Nikon or other?
Canon. Yeah, always been Canon, apart from my first Sony, which didn't last long.
Why always Canon? Was it just something, was it the first camera you
know.
had?
Yeah, first decent camera I bought, and the menu system, don't need to look now, know where the buttons are. The thought of like relearning the buttons and menu system of another camera, horrible thought. It's so second nature. If you feel like part of the camera, it feels, when I hold the body, it's just an extension of my hand now. I know what every button does. I know 2 clicks for this, 1 click for that. You know, that again speeds everything up.
Yeah, I spoke to Ian Gavin and he said it should be, your camera should be like driving. Should be like changing gear. You should know it inside out. And if you don't, go and shoot more.
Yeah,
I thought that was a really, really good way of looking at it, and you've said exactly the same. Prime or zoom?
Zoom.
Ooh.
Flexibility. I like to be able to snap between a portrait and a landscape image, probably on a 70 to 200, and I can go from 70mm on a landscape to like 135 on a portrait, and they're 2 completely different shots.
And finally, and then I will let you go and enjoy the rest of your afternoon, if someone wants a career in photography, what advice would you give them starting out? Shoot
loads. Just shoot. Don't let people know you're doing it for free, but do as much as you can. Don't say I'm a natural light photographer, because I think that just means you don't know how to use studio light. Have a go, try and learn it. It opens up loads more possibilities and possibly loads more avenues of work, even if you don't want to do portraits or commercial work, family portraits, weddings. You've got so much more vocabulary as a photographer if you learn studio lighting. And I think if you want to do well, you're going to have a blend of business person, artist, and geek.
Adam Hills, you've been absolutely sensational. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, mate. I've loved talking. I haven't geeked out on photography properly for 6 weeks now, so that's been a real like scratching my back.
That was my conversation with the wonderful Adam Hills. A huge thank you to Adam for giving up his time to share his photography journey and details of how he developed his business with our incredible community. If you'd like to find out more about Adam, you can find him on Instagram at Adam Hills Photography, or visit his website www.adamhillsphotography.com. That is Hills with an H, Hills. And if you enjoy the Standout Photography Show, please subscribe and download future episodes on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you can find time to leave a review, we would absolutely love to hear what you think of the show, and more importantly, what you'd like to hear more of in future. This show is all about you. It's all about making you a better photographer. So please do let us know. And if you do leave a review, please be sure to include your Instagram or Twitter handle so we can thank you personally, like Soozles this week, who said 5 stars, listen to it. This is a great podcast. The host has a lovely interview style that clearly puts his guests at ease and gets the best out of the interview. Well worth a listen. Soozles, your check is in the post. Thank you. For now, thank you as always for joining us. I've been Matthew Walker, he has been Adam Hills, and you have been sensational. Until next time, take care.